The Chicago Digital Accessibility and Inclusive Design Meetup presents Accessibility Across Your Organization with Viktor Ko.
Perfect. All right. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Victor, and I'm going to be talking about accessibility across your organization. So first, a quick intro about me. I work at Packback. I am kind of our in-house accessibility specialist. My full role is front-end engineer and accessibility specialist. So at first, you might take that to mean I work on the web, I do a lot of accessibility work with websites. And you're not wrong. That's completely true. But I realized that to really help our customers and to push accessibility forward, I would actually have to work across our organization and get everyone on board. So this talk is going to be highlighting some of the learnings I have, how to work with different teams, and just some of the experiences I have. And before we get started, I set a timer for myself so that Dennis doesn't have to kick me off stage. We don't want to see that. So who is this for? So fundamentally, this is for people who care about accessibility. An educated guess tells me that's all of you. So I think you're in the right place. So this is for people who are accessibility advocates in an organization from any field. Whether you're in marketing, legal, web, any kind of place, if you're an advocate for accessibility in your organization, this is going to be directed to you. Now this is also going to be for people who want to become accessibility advocates. If you're not in that role right now, but that's what you want to do, then also for you. And if you're interested in accessibility generally, this talk is also for you. So what are we going to cover? So I'm going to be talking about the role different teams play in accessibility and how to get teams implementing accessibility. Sounds pretty simple. What this doesn't cover, and this is the most important part, I will not explain to you how to get your team to want accessibility. If your team does not want to be accessible, that is really bad. Let's start there. But second, there's a lot smarter people who can explain the business value and how you can get people on board. I'm not going to be able to cover that. That is a talk in and of itself. And then the details of accessibility failures. So I'm going to assume you have some knowledge of accessibility. We're going to be talking pretty entry level, but I'm not going to dive into the details of WCAG and all of the accessibility specifications to explain those to you. I'm going to be mostly looking at high level, what do different teams care about? So let's get started. So the first and foremost thing that you need to do as an accessibility advocate is spread accessibility. So before we dive into the teams, before we dive into the specifics, this is like the main thing. If you want to be the accessibility advocate at your organization, then you need to be waking up every single day and saying, I want to push this organization forward in accessibility. Like I say, for accessibility to take off company-wide, you need to be an advocate and be able to talk to everyone. As someone says in open source, if someone isn't waking up every single day and thinking, this has to get done, it probably won't. So you need to take responsibility and push it forward in your organization. And it sounds like a lot, but trust me, you can all manage. So how do we help individual teams become accessible? Let's start with design. So design is one of the most crucial components of accessibility. There's Derek, who I think spoke on inclusive design. There's lots of different techniques around this. And one of your jobs might be, if your design team isn't super familiar with accessibility, how to get them on board and how to show them what accessibility really means. So at first, you have to train designers on common disabilities and common accessibility failures. If your designers don't know about the different disabilities that can affect your customers or just affect people in general, they won't know how to make those designs accommodating. And also common accessibility failures. Once designers get that feedback and you talk about contrast failures and looking at standard input mechanisms and all those fun things that WCAG details, that will really help them make accessible designs. And that means when you hand it off to a developer, you're cutting off a lot of the failures right from the get-go. And consider using a framework like inclusive design. Microsoft has pushed this in a whole different direction. They have a great set of materials on that. But inclusive design is really a great way to make your designers really, really inclusive and make sure accessibility is covered. Because fundamentally, if you test with people with disabilities, you're going to have a more accessible design. So up next, and this is my kind of like specialty, development. So you want to create fully accessible web pages, apps. I say web pages here, that's what I do. But you really need to get down and dirty and work on training. Lots of developers don't know much about accessibility. This isn't individual people's fault. It's just kind of how people have prioritized things over the long run. And we can work to fix that. So we need to train people, tell them about disabilities and accessibility failures, teach people about WCAG, all of those important things, and get people really on board and show them how to make accessible websites products of all kinds. And the other thing is to bake accessibility into other stages like design and QA. Your developers aren't going to be able to catch all accessibility failures. They're not going to be able to make fully accessible products. I can tell you that myself. I know a great deal about accessibility, but there's failures I might not think of. I might not account for everything. So you need to make sure that at design, accessibility is included, and then you need to make sure to follow up on the development with accessible quality assurance. So let's dig into that next. So your quality assurance team can be one of your biggest strengths when it comes to maintaining accessibility. They can do a lot of great work in checking for accessibility failures and really looking out for people with disabilities and making sure they can use your site well. So how do we as accessibility advocates get them to do that? So we need to train QA staff on accessibility principles that they can spot during testing. Again, like designers, once people have the ideas in their heads about what common disabilities are and what are common accessibility failures, they're going to be looking for them. Once your QA staff knows to look for contrast failures, they'll say, let's analyze this text. Let's see if it meets the requirements that WCAG sets out for us. And then you can even dig in deeper. You can give them the specific accessibility failures, and you can have a lot of tools that help with that. So they can spot the individual WCAG failures and really give developers detailed feedback on features that might not be as accessible as they should be. And then finally, test using screen readers. This doesn't just apply to screen readers. Keyboard usage and other things also apply. But our QA team at Packback, where I work, has started using screen readers, and that's really helped in QA catching accessibility issues. And that reinforces the knowledge that our designers and our developers have, but it also lets them really get a good understanding of why we're doing these things in the first place. Now, marketing. You might not think of marketing in terms of accessibility all the time, but really there's a lot that they can do. So marketing ties into design, because when you're creating marketing materials, you have to make sure that they're accessible. You have to make sure they're contrast compliant. You have to make sure that if it's a video, it's closed captioned, it's audio content, you have a text alternative, all of those important things. So in the same way, lots of social media platforms have great features for baking in accessibility into your content. So I've worked with our marketing team to make sure that they know how to use YouTube's closed captioning feature to make sure all of our videos are captioned. And I've also worked with them to show them tools for checking contrast in their designs, marketing materials, and all the other fun promotional stuff that they do. So making sure that our marketing material is accessible ensures that when we're reaching out as a brand, we are putting our best foot forward. And now we've covered a good basic list of all the teams. I'm sure there's lots of teams in your organization. I probably haven't covered them all. But now that everyone knows about accessibility, what do we do next? Are we done? Not really. So you have to set clear rules and expectations around accessibility. Now this doesn't come down to you, it comes down to your teams and trusting them to put in place good guidelines. Our marketing team, for example, setting out the guideline that all of our videos should have closed captioning. When we're working on our website, we might set out that we want to make sure that we're fully WCAG 2.0, 2.1 AA compliant. So make sure that you have those rules that you all agree upon. And that way you can set that standard and make sure it's reinforced. And that's the main other point, holding everyone accountable. If you as an accessibility advocate spot an issue with marketing material or the product, then you have to point that out to people and you have to feel comfortable saying, hey, this isn't as accessible as it should be. We need to make sure that all of our customers can really work with this content and make sure that it reaches out to them. So that's about it. I really keep it to the lightning. And who am I to tell you this? So my name is Viktor Ko. I am a front-end engineer specializing in accessibility at Packback. Now, what does that mean? I work with auditors on WCAG compliance. So they give us huge, ginormous spreadsheets of failures, warnings, and successes. And I work through parsing that data, putting those into our project management tools, and making sure that we actually get those done and we become WCAG compliant. And I also work on getting all teams trained and onboarded with accessibility. So I've worked with our marketing team with captions, like I mentioned. I've worked with all of our different departments, design, everything, to make sure that everyone knows about accessibility and is prioritized as a core part of our product and our platform. So that is about it. I left room for questions. Dennis doesn't want me to do that, so I'm going to leave. Thank you so much, and have a great day.
Thank you. Thanks to our speaker, Viktor Ko. Thanks to our venue sponsor, The Nerdery. Visit them online at nerdery.com. Live captions provided by ACS, alternative communication services. Visit them online at acscaptions.com. Live captions sponsored by McDonald's. We're loving it. This has been a production of the Chicago Digital Accessibility and Inclusive Design Meetup. Visit us online at meetup.com/A11YChi. Follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/A11YChi. Follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/A11YChi. Subscribe to our YouTube channel to view recordings of past meetups at youtube.com/C/Chicago Digital Accessibility Inclusive Design. Copyright 2018. All rights reserved.